Does any of this stuff in the news about Israel have anything at all to do with a God search? Hi, I'm Michael Shevack, and welcome to Godsearch. We're here to help open up the experience we call God. We don't know what God is. No one really does. Every religion, every people has had its stories, had its descriptions, had its mythologies, and there are similarities. What we do know, if we take a poll, what we do know is that there is an experience called truth, called goodness, an experience where we learn how to act in a way that's in alignment to the order that reality is designed upon, so that we create happiness. Happiness. You know, the Greeks used to call that eudaimonia, good gods. We know that this experience exists, and the purpose of this podcast is to help you explore it. In the past couple of podcasts, I've taken the indulgence of experimenting with interviewing other people, and it's fun. I plan on doing more of them. I thought this time, though, I would kind of interview myself. And because a lot of people are asking me, since, I am ordained a rabbi, what does this stuff that is going on in the Middle East with Iran and Israel and everything have to do with searching for the living, breathing, amazing experience of goodness that, you know, we can condense and make the word God out of? What does it have to do? And what does this funny little odd group of people from the Middle East, which are now called Jews, at sometimes in the past they were called Hebrews, or they would be called Israelites, and later on they became known as Judeans, and then it was shortened to Jews, and they had various names. But what does this strange little ex-nomadic group have to do with spirituality and the experience of God? What is all of this hullabaloo? It's less than 1% of the entire population of the world, and yet so much hovers around the people of Israel, the nation of Israel, the laws of Israel, the Messiah of Israel. All of this stuff. Why is it so important? So I'm going to interview myself, okay? Hi, Mike. What do you think about Israel? I mean, these days, people just can't find God in it. And then there are other people who are so completely entranced by it, they see that the end times are coming and that all sorts of culminations of predictions that are in the New Testament are going to take place. What do you think? Well, hi, Mike. Nice to meet you. Hi, I'm Mike. So anyway, let me lose the affect and talk about what I think. Israel as a nation, old and new, ancient or present, is founded upon a very real human relationship to God and reality. Now, when I say God, I mean that universe of all universes, that reality of all realities, the existence that includes any and all existences, that domain that contains all subdomains. Another way to say that is that creation that includes all creations, and that creator that includes all creators. That's what I mean by the word God. Israel has a very particular relationship because it declared God in God's ultimate, unknowable nature to be formless, meaning anything that we know to be reality through human cognition is somehow incomplete. And indeed, even our human cognition exists within and is a part, if I can use that word part, or an aspect of what we might call God. Israel is a very peculiar nation in that it is devoted to that unknowable God. That unknowable God. Now, we're not the only ones. We are not the first. Common mythology, as we talked about in earlier Godsearches, has the Jews inventing God. We are the first to have one God. You know, that's the common mythology. And oftentimes that's the party platform. But that's not true. India, East India, had one God way before us. They are the first recorded language. They are the first astonishing religious scriptures. They had one God. That was a multiplicity of gods within a God, Brahman. But that's not particularly different than you have in the opening sentence of Genesis, where you have a collective noun, Elohim, which has a singular verb. It says bara, not baru, means that God, which includes a multiplicity in itself, creates. What the Hebrew people brought to the world was not that notion. What they did is they brought to the world another notion, which is the notion of history. History. Now, history is not what you learn in school. It's really, honestly, it's not that academic stuff where you sit around and you have all those dates and you got to remember that 1492 Columbus crossed the ocean blue. History, in a theological sense, is the continual forward motion and process by which each individual and groups of individual come to know that there is only one essential singular reality to all existence, which is that singular reality. We come to know that everything else is a creation of that, existing as that within itself as it. It's very hard to wrap your head around, but this is a condensed view. All right. Israel introduced the notion of history, that the process of the unification of the entire world, the process by which we would all come to know that, although in various names and various cultural expressions, it might be different, that we'd all come to know that there is a foundational reality, which we are commonly calling God. Very complex and very dangerous word, as we said in podcast number 1. The notion of history, that not only is the organizational structure of all reality singular and unified in a very dynamic, complex way, beyond our ability to fully discern it, but that this unity is to be expressed in and through human civilization and human life, and that the world will ultimately become unified and come to know, and that it is an expression of this one unity, and that the world will ultimately become unified as a singular humanity, a kind of species consciousness. And that's the tremendous gift of Israel, the Hebrews, the Israelites, the Jews, even the modern state of Israel to the world. So, oh, really? The modern state that seems to be bombing everyone on every border Is that part of it too? Yes, but no one is saying that this isn't a complex process. History, as it has been lived out, is a complex and dangerous process. It is far more complex and far more detailed and far more uh, dangerous than we really can wrap our heads around. Now, I'm not going to go into every single detail because it would keep us going forever and ever. But there are certain features of the nation of Israel which have been fairly constant, fairly constant. One of them I just spoke about is the principle of non-idolatry, which we spoke about very early on, which is nothing which is formed and knowably formed is the total representation of that unity that we might call God. That's a very holy principle. But there's another aspect, which is a correlation of it. You might know from your reading your Bible of the story that we just passed Passover, of the story of the Hebrew people in Egypt. Well, spiritually, the people of Israel have been devoted to the God of all creation being the power over their lives. That God is the sovereignty, is the Lord, is the power that governs the destiny and the purpose of the Jewish people. And any human pretender to power, whether it is an ancient Egyptian pharaoh, whether it is an Assyrian king, whether it is Babylonia, Philistia, ancient Rome, Christian Rome, which became a problem, even though they had taken in the God of Israel. Variations of that, like certain Protestant cultures. All of these little tiny empires, which appointed themselves to be complete representatives of God. Israel, as a people, locked heads. It seems very curious that throughout the history, and we're talking 3,500 or more, depending on what dating system you use, is that Israel seems to have come in conflict with every single major imperial force that has ever existed, including, of course, Nazi Germany. Every single imperial force. This one tiny group of people, less than 1% of the population, like a David fighting a Goliath, locked horns with the most massive civilization and empires the world has ever manufactured. How does that happen? Why does it happen? The spirituality that we're discussing on Godsearch is not disconnected from the traditional religious viewpoints. The problem is the traditional religious viewpoints have lost their spiritual purpose. They've become political. They've become politicized. They've become, cultic in pushing certain governmental forms and certain policies and certain economic, modes of operation, such as, capitalism. Great. Capitalism's wonderful. Please don't think that I don't like it. I like it a lot. But the spiritual essence has been lost. Israel's purpose historically has been to lock heads with anyone who is an earthly power that pretends to represent the ultimate power in existence. That seems to have been, if you look at us, that seems to be what we are continuously doing. and for over 3,000 years. You know, if you're kind of Catholic, and I have a great admiration for Catholicism, and you want to discern the sainthood of someone, you take a look at them and you see the lessons in their lives and where they have acted and what are the themes in common in that person, so that you can abstract the individual and say that a person is a representative that is venerable for this particular thing. You know, if you're Saint Anthony, it's a patron saint of lost objects, and this is how sainthood is inspired. By the same token, if you were to look at the people of Israel in all its various forms, you see a continuous battle against imperial thinking processes, imperial cults. And this little tiny people just bang heads with it all the time. And that is a very powerful statement, because what they are doing, though they maybe have lost the spiritual impulse underneath, they may have forgotten, what they're doing is asserting that there is a power which is greater than any individual collective imperial mind, which we might call God or Hashem, right? And that is greater than any leader, that is greater than any nation, that is greater than any religious cult, that is greater than any human organization or human civilization. That's an astonishing thing. Astonishing thing. By the same token, Israel has been beaten down so many times, and one has to question, if one believes that there is a spiritual reasoning behind things, well, is that just due because they committed a sin and the devil smashed them down? Or at times, were there processes within history that had to shape the character and the ego of the Hebrew people so that it was consonant with its own purpose? You know, did we get full of ourselves? Did we have, you know, excessive hatred in us? You know, excessive hatred that caused us to at times undergo repression and even, dispersion around the world. The story of Israel is therefore the story of all of us. All of us. We all have to, on our God search for that unity and that principle and that goodness of all goodnesses, and we have to learn to avoid getting lost in traps of mere mortal power, mere human thinking process, mere human organizational structures, mere human teachings that are not taking their light from something which is bigger, better, nobler, brighter, and indeed the source of it all. Israel's struggle as a nation, as people, individual Jews who struggle, and other nations who struggle and contend with Israel, which has been going on for thousands of years. We are all struggling with one thing, which is the limit of human power. The limit of human power. Now, one is not going to get rid of Israel any more than one is going to get rid of being human, because we personify that teaching. If a nation decides to attack Israel, to become dominant to Israel, well, they're going to be attacking themselves if they believe that there is a power that is greater than them. If they don't believe there's a power greater than them, then for certain they will experience their own lessons also, so that their actions and their use of power and their misuse of sovereignty, which we'll talk about, is in the right spiritual context. Our entire world is on a God search. And what we experience on a personal level, and we've talked a lot about that on a personal level on God Search, also takes place on a collective level. Every single nation, which is a nation, is not a state. Okay, that's a political structure. A nation has common culture, common background, similarities of breeding, cultural breeding that has been part of it. Every single nation has a uniqueness. Every single nation has an arrogance of ego. Every single nation has abused its own power from time to time because every single nation is a collectivity of human beings, and this is a human problem. But if any nation attacks the fundamental purpose behind Israel, they're attacking themselves. And the history of the world has demonstrated that. Assyria attacks the people of Israel. Assyria dissolves and is spread all over the world. Ancient Rome did not last. Philistia did not last. Ancient Babylonia did not last. We're kind of dealing with the remnants of the Babylonian Empire now in a new form. You cannot attack a nation which is devoted to something invisible and devoted to something beyond the human mind to be able to control without that coming back to you. Karma, midah keneged midah, what cause and effect, sowing and reaping, because the experience of Israel spiritually is at the very core foundation of the human experience. Now, the people of Israel, they're complex, and I'm not defending them 100%. I don't defend anyone 100%, including myself. Okay, I make plenty of mistakes. But they anchor incredibly important principles. One, the principle of idolatry, of non-idolatry. Two, the principle of sovereignty, that a nation has a right to exist as an entity, as a cultural entity, as a collectivity of people directly under God. Sovereignty. This is something that wasn't really defined in general culture until the Treaty of Westphalia. Okay? And if you define sovereignty to too much of an extreme, where each nation has its unassailable right to its own stuff, you have the same problems you have in America, where individual freedom is taken out of context and becomes extreme. But nonetheless, the notion of a people having sovereignty because they have a direct relationship with the source of all, indeed, all itself, is very, very Hebrew. The notion that this is an individual nation with a unique culture and a unique background, a subphylum of the Asiatic family, defines another principle related to sovereignty called individuality. All of us are unique. There isn't a single human being that does not have uniqueness, though there are certain commonalities we all share at the same time. But we have an individuality that is part of our similarity. Each of us has a unique face with more muscles that move in the human face than any other animal, more expressions that are possible. So you have non-idolatry, you have sovereignty, you have individuality, you have free will. Israel was astonishing in its most ancient form. It, it was ecologically sensitive. It considered the passage of the seasons and the ground and the land and the produce to all be creations of God. Of God. It was naturally ecological. The term ecology is a later term from more of a Greco-Roman culture and more academic Greco-Roman culture. But Israel was ecologically principled. It's in the Bible. It is not anti-God to be ecological. It's in the Bible. Israel also saw and believed in the right of the human being to manufacture an enduring civilization on the land. We were not merely animals, we were supernatural animals. And we were not supposed to just live in caves and forage. We could create a civilization provided that that civilization through our minds functioned in harmony with the design of the creator as the creator designed it upon the earth, which is our most imminent aspect of the cosmos that we can touch. So Israel allowed for ecological preservation at the same time as human societal creativity. This is astonishing. If you put together this sovereignty, individuality, free will, meaning not strictly bound to what nature produces on the earth, and you add to it the anti-imperialism, the pro-ecology, the pro-human creativity, and you place all of this under a power which is greater than any human power, what Israel represents is a prototype, not only for all societies, but for each individual. Now, here's the curious thing. Because of this, Israel was probably, and I don't think there is anything that can compare to it, the most anti-colonial nation that has ever existed. Every single attempt by any imperial force to colonize it was resisted. The religious martyrdom was a Jewish invention at the time of the story of Hanukkah. No one would waste their times dying for their gods in the same way. But there was something very, very sacred about this God who was invisible and formless by human understanding. Israel anchored the sacred principles of what a nation should be and what the individual's responsibilities were in order to fulfill life, in order to have a God search that was productive, where what was concealed became revealed. What was searched for could be found. A door that could be knocked upon and that is open. That's the astonishing thing about the people of Israel. Now, it is a curious irony that after the Holocaust, Western nations could no longer be anti-Jewish and be part of allied Western life. Up until that time, Jews were really not part of Western civilization completely. We participated, we contributed mightily, but we were always on the outskirts. After World War II, what happened was that degree of anti-human viciousness and that degree of anti-Jewishness became, formally speaking, non-allied behavior. non-American behavior, not democratic behavior, not Christian behavior, not Western behavior. And because of that shift that took place finally after a few thousand years, Israel today, the nation, the modern state, finds itself in the situation where it is associating with powerful nations that are helping it survive, whether it's the US or Europe or the United Nations that ushered it into existence. Israel is aligned to forces that used to be colonial, such as, France, such as England. It is an ally. So what's happening is because of the difficulties around the Palestinian people, what's happening is Israel is now seen, instead of being the most anti-colonial people that has ever existed, we are seen as colonial. That what we're doing is attempting to colonize the original territory of Israel and discard other people. Now, I'm not going to go too deeply into that because this is, by the way, Godsearch. Welcome. Go to yourgodsearch.com and please feel free to send me a note and we can talk about this in more detail. There are many different varieties in the economy of thinking around Israel that clog the problem. If Israel is a modern state, we have to discuss what modern means. And oftentimes it meant imitating nation states in World War I and World War II that, according to how they operated, and Israel became modeled, a modern state became modeled on nation states in Europe. This, of course, poses difficulties because modern states, nation states, were the real cause behind World War I and World War II. Is Israel an ancient state? Is its purpose biblical to actually refill the national borders around the time of Solomon's empire? Many, many people devoted who are devoted religion to their religion and devoted to their nation's history work tirelessly to replace the original biblical borders that Israel is supposed to fulfill, the original biblical borders on Judea and Samaria. Other people view Israel as just yet another democratic nation. Um, it's a modern state, but postmodern. And here there are difficulties, just as Israel has difficulties giving votes to people who are not loyal to the nation, uh, because it would cease to be a Jewish state. Europe is also experiencing that. There are enormous numbers of good and worthy, wonderful Muslim people who are in Germany and Holland and France and other places. And there is a fear that because of democracy, that if they all vote, they could vote out the originating culture of the land that they're in. In other words, instead of it would no longer be a Jewish state, it would no longer be a Dutch state, it would no longer be French, it would no longer be German. This war between the pluralism of democracy and the original culture of the state in which other people can inhabit is no longer just a Jewish problem. We are all learning because of the blessed sharing of Islamic culture all around the world, the dispersion of Islamic culture. We are all learning very much some of the difficulties that Israel had in trying to define what a modern state actually is. The point that I'm bringing up here is this: the conditions on the war are egregious. I'm not going to go into what I think was correct and incorrect and all these. I have a peace plan myself, and I'm happy to talk to you about it at another time. And I've had numerous meetings about it. It's very counterintuitive. Most everything I do is very counterintuitive. And I'm not going to go into the details and point fingers at who's right and who's wrong because I don't want to go there. This podcast is Godsearch. It's Godsearch. It has a particular purpose. But I do want to say that the purpose of Israel, even though we're getting lost in tremendous current events and horrible political and military threats, the purpose of Israel as the unique human civilization that it is, that has defined a God beyond us, a mind beyond our minds, that has placed humility at its core, that has defined sovereignty, individuality, has been anti-colonial, anti-imperial, ecologically pro-ecology and pro-human progress and creativity. That nation which defined that and instituted it biblically still contributes to the vision of the entire world. In fact, it is at its center. It is not at its center because of the past. It's not at the center because, Jews are taking over the entire world and therefore it is at its center. It's at its center because these aspirations are at the center of all human life, whether it is personal or collective. All human life, whether it is personal or collective. So here's my God search challenge to everyone, since I'm interviewing myself here. See Israel in every nation, because every nation is struggling with the arrogance of assigning human beings more power than they have a right to. Every nation is struggling with the limits of its own sovereignty, where it asserts its dominance in the world outside of proper contexts and creates an exceptionalism which distorts the entire meaning of covenant from a religious point of view. Every nation is dealing with alliances that are stepping on ethical boundaries that are sacred. Every nation in the development of what it needs for human happiness and human civilization is stepping on the planet, and these days the planet is stepping back upon us to teach us a lesson. Oh, is that biblical? Yeah, it's the story of Noah. It's the same story. The planet rebels when we get out of control. Please stop looking at the people of Israel and Israel itself as if it is removed from reality, either so special that rules don't apply to it, or so unique the rules don't apply to it. Either so special the rules don't apply to it, or so odd, that's the right, so odd that it just doesn't fit in. Israel holds to a light which was kindled in ancient times, thousands of years ago, and it is a light that has been continuously maintained and continuously lit over and over again when threatened. So what's the threat? And this is the threat. Where Western civilization took many of the great ideas of Israel and they taught them as principles and expanded a world civilization, a global civilization around the world, which is astonishing. There is one component of the people of Israel that they did not. considered to be sacred. And that component is indigeneity. Israel is an indigenous people. It has its sacred mountains. It has its sacred rivers. It has a lot like, the Cherokees or certain Native American or other indigenous peoples, where their spirituality is not just conceptual and in their head. It's not just sky, but it's also ground and ground. Now, if you look at world civilization, what we call universal, you'll see that out of Western civilization came enormous disrespect for indigenous peoples, enormous raping and pillaging of peoples, the enormous employment, if not sometimes enslavement, of people to industrial machinery. You have a violation of indigenous rights, a violation of sacred spirituality of a group of people to their particular land. Israel calls every single nation in the world to look at indigenous rights under a universal God. Indigenous rights is not a violation of one God, which is cosmic, and therefore you can't be too individual or too particular, or in your particular land, you can't have your home with your family on your street with your picket fence. This notion of Israel being too particular, too tribalist, too indigenous, comes in direct conflict with the overwhelming teachings of contemporary Western political thinking. It comes in conflict. And if you take a look at the difficulties in South America and the difficulties in Asia and the difficulties in certain areas of Europe and the difficulties between different religions, you will see virtually 100% of the time violation of indigenous rights by marauding nations, by cults, and by imperial powers that did not respect the sacredness of human beings in relationship to land. Now, I want to say that because that is the foundation to any credible discussion regarding the destiny of the Palestinian people. What is the relationship of spirituality to land? What is the relationship of land to materia in our mitochondria by which we maintain the energy of our bodies? What is the relationship of that to volcanoes and sunshine? Hey, there is a very strange mystery here. It is a singular entity which we're calling God. And included in there is rights to land, which have been greatly disrespected in the past centuries and need to be looked at again. Rights to land, indigenous relationships. Universal does not mean we're all part of the planet without us also being on the planet in certain locations and certain cultural forms and expressions that are related to the land. Indigenousness. So anyway, this is my interview, okay? Take into your own God search, your own relationship to the land that you're on, your own relationship to where you're living, your home, the sacredness of the soil around you, the sacredness of the community that you're in, and try to appreciate that the indigenous component to your God search is very, very critical to your well-being. So make sure you're on a land that makes you happy, all right? and a land that can coexist with other people who are also on their land. I really believe that one day each man will be able to live on their land peacefully and have their vineyards. Every woman too. I don't want to get lost in the fact that the Bible, used the word man in a general sense. That we all will have our sacred homes. We will all have our territories, that we will all bring forth from the earth produce in a way that doesn't violate the planet and that feeds and nourishes us. I believe in the dream of Israel because the dream of Israel is the dream of the entire world. That's my interview. I interviewed myself. This is Michael Shevack for Godsearch. Thanks for being here. Come join us every single Wednesday. It's about 5:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Times. And have a God blessed day. And please don't get lost in all of the negativity and the horrible news and all of that. Okay? Try to stay clear and stay happy. It's hard. There's a lot of negativity that is raining down on us. Well, consider getting a cosmic umbrella. It's very ancient. The Hebrews did it. It's a good thing. Have a cosmic umbrella to protect you. God bless. See you next week. Bye bye.